Welcome, everyone. We're just going to give it about a minute for more students to join, and then we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody. We're just going to give it about a minute. Alrighty, we're gonna get started. So welcome everybody to the final insight scoop of the series. Today we are going to be focusing on interviews, and we are welcoming our panelists, Caroline, Emily, and Kim, each representing different organizations, different perspectives. Caroline representing McKinsey, Emily from AT&T, and Kim from DirecTV. So with all that said, we're going to get started with our first question. Emily, if you want to start us off with, talking about what students can do to prepare for interviews. I know we tell a lot of students to do their research, but what does that really mean, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, hi everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Emily, and I'll probably share my LinkedIn later if y'all want to connect, whether it's about AT&T or other opportunities. Interviewing is definitely, I would say, like an art and a science, and I think there's always room for improvement. You could, be doing tons of interviews and still feel like, oh, there's lots of things I can work on. So I would say give yourself some grace. But I think preparation is so important when it comes to interviewing. It really depends on the company that you're interviewing with, right? So maybe it might depend on the industry and the vertical, your job or your interview prep might look a little bit different. Obviously, if you're going into consulting, it has its own recruitment process. If you're going into a technical field, it's going to have a certain interview process. Maybe if it's something around like sales and marketing, marketing might have some creative aspects to it where you might have to create a presentation. So I would say always, ask those questions. If maybe you are able to chat beforehand with someone to get some preparation on what the recruitment process is like. And I would say as far as just like general tidbits, I think having at least the range can vary, right? But if you have at least at the bare minimum 5 professional stories that you have them just in your pocket that you're ready to speak to during an interview. A lot of the first round interview questions are going to be a little bit similar. So whether it's around depending on the interview, right? But if it's going to ask you around like soft skills like leadership examples, teamwork, communication, even miscommunication, a time you failed, a time you achieved a really amazing accomplishment or milestone. I feel like a lot of the questions will be in that range. So having responses like whether it's 5 to 7 stories that you can tailor to those questions is going to be super powerful and helpful throughout the interview process. My last tidbit there would be to really study the job description. If there are certain things that we're looking for, like skill wise, whether it's technical or even just like your soft skills, you can tailor your responses to something within the job description because we're going to ask questions tailored to that. And then lastly, I know I said lastly before this, but I always tell candidates practice with maybe 2 or 3 different types of people if you have the time. I would say someone who is a little bit more stoic or stern, someone in the middle, someone who might be maybe they kind of have both personalities. They might be conversational, they might not be, and then someone a little bit more lax. Once you start getting a hang of those different types of people, it will really help you excel throughout the interview process. So that's my advice there.
Yeah, and I piggyback on what Emily said. Hi, everyone. I'm Kim Donovan, and I'm with DirecTV. 100% agree. And I would also think about when you're developing your stories, those 5 to 7 scenarios that you can, lean on when you're giving your answers, have some quantifiable result. data embedded in that story too. So you're going to want to talk about, this is what I did, and that's great, but this is what it meant, right? This was the impact that my experience had, whether it's, moving a metric up or down, or you saved your student organization money. Regardless of what it is, numbers always are great to have in your back pocket. In terms of how to prepare for interviews with DirecTV, when you're looking at your company, when you're researching your companies, and you're all going to research your companies before you interview them, understand the culture that's communicated on the website, right? And make sure that that's somewhere that you see yourself. And if you don't necessarily see yourself there, ask questions around that. If you don't see anything about, how do you support various organizations? What do the philanthropic efforts look like? Things in that way of thinking that are important to you. Make sure that you resonate there. Got to be a good fit on both sides.
Yeah, I agree with everything that's being said here. And McKinsey, if you're coming through, so for McKinsey, if you're coming through our campus recruiting process, which I lead for USC, our interviews are kind of set up differently from a lot of other firms, right? So we have something called a personal experience interview and a case interview. They're both integrated into the one interview, and the time is shared between the two parts. So preparing for that is very important, utilizing the resources online. We have all our prompts for the professional experience interviews on there. And what goes into that is you can get a prompt, for example, for inclusive leadership, like share an example of a time you worked with a diverse team towards a common goal or something like that, right? So preparing for that and really preparing the story, testing it with someone else, looking at cases, casing with someone, also giving cases to someone, and just utilizing the resources provided. I'll also share at the end a link to connect with McKinsey, which is our program for anyone who's looking for a role in 2020, starting in 2026. So through that program, you'll also get access to a lot of those resources. But for McKinsey, we have a pretty set interview model that surrounds the PEI, personal experience interview, and the case. So.
Thank you for all the advice shared. I think you all kind of mentioned this a little bit, but like how research is a part of the interview prep process, right? What sort of information should students be looking for, like on your websites or LinkedIn, social media, that would help them in the interview? And as a follow-up to that, what have students brought up in interviews that made them stand out to you all?
I can
Yeah,
go. Yeah. So all of the above is the right answer to the question in terms of where you should go do your research, right? And even Glassdoor, right? I mean, you'll get information from there as well. But it's one thing to research the company, and that's super important. We talked about that from a prep in the beginning, and how do you prepare, but you also need to research the industry, especially if the industry is new for you. So understand what's happening in that industry at that time, what the company, any recent activity that the company has had in that industry at that given time. That probably, and I don't do a lot of the interviews, most of the business units do their own interviews, but the feedback that I get is, this student knew exactly that we just did XYZ. How impressive. They were super prepared. So for us, the students that know who we are and how we are integrated in the industry and have examples and can talk to that are the ones that kind of stand out to us.
And I think for McKinsey, with our kind of set interview model, also again, feedback on candidates that were prepared versus that weren't prepared, those that are actually looking at the cases, looking at these personal experience interviews and practicing ahead of time. You can really tell when someone's just kind of browsed in terms of where to look for. And kind of our webpage has everything you need, from videos to prompts to retired cases, and then again utilizing the resources we provide as a USC recruiting team through Connect with McKinsey. Those would, yeah,
I love all the industry focused answers to that. I'll relate it to AT&T as well. I think getting even familiar with the company's services, so whether that's AT&T, DirecTV, or what scope of responsibilities you would have at a company like McKinsey, right? I think even showing that you've done the homework, it's okay to name drop. I've let candidates know, like, there are a lot of referrals, right? But you'll get a lot of information from people who are actually working at the company, right? So whether you chatted with one of us at a career fair or one of the expos, or even you set up a coffee chat with someone, I feel like that shows that you've gone the extra mile and you really want to work at a company like the three that we have here today. So I think that I've noticed that's something that candidates don't mention sometimes, and I recommend that you do say, like, hey, I spoke with Kim at the DEI Expo, and she shared XYZ about this program. And that, for me, I feel like that makes candidates stand out, making sure that you're like, hey, we've met with these companies at these different events.
Thank you all. I love that you mentioned that, Emily. I feel like sometimes we visit like multiple events, we engage with you all like through different events, but we forget to mention it, right? So if you are engaging with our recruiters at different events, or even right now you're watching them, listening to them in this program, you can mention that later if you do meet Caroline or Emily, that you heard of their advice on interviewing, right? Because you're taking the extra step to learn from them. But shifting a little bit more to thinking about like interview questions. So our students often ask us, like, how do you even think of interview questions, right? It's hard to anticipate them. So what advice would you all have for students to think of possible interview questions in preparation for their interviews? This could be specific to your organizations or just broadly.
I think for McKinsey, it's, again, since we have our interviews so set, like the model, it's really looking at those personal experience interview questions in the case. That is really kind of the standard that we have. I think it's always good to prepare any questions you might have for the ones interviewing you. If you have something at the end, there's always time to connect a little bit with the interviewer at the start, at the end. I think that is always a good way to kind of get some engagement. But I think coming into the interview process with us, my biggest advice would just be bring your authentic self, and like anything you want to share, anything you want to talk about. That's really why we're there. We're looking for potential. We're not looking for people that have a specific experience. It's just really, you're coming in with your potential. We're seeing something. If you get to the interview stage, you're already halfway there, right? So but definitely like prepare any questions you might have for the interviewer, I think is a good tip. Yeah, I'll hand it over to someone else. But
I can go really quick. Yeah, I think questions are really important, and another way to stand out. I think most cases people ask questions at the end. I would say always have like 2 to 3 ready. I wouldn't make, I mean, sometimes you might have some general questions, but because you guys are preparing for your interview, I'm sure you'll tailor them to the company that you're interviewing with. You really want to try to avoid asking like generic questions that you can find on a company website or on LinkedIn, because obviously that's not going to make you stand out. Even like you can even switch the general questions, right? A lot of times people ask like, what is a typical day look like? And then you can maybe make it more specific to the company, right? Or like even try to get the hiring manager to envision you in that role, right? Like, what would a typical day for me in this role look like? Or even ask questions like, what's the most important thing I should accomplish in the first 60 days or 90 days, right? That way they see that you are determined to like be in that role and really make an impact in like the first 3 months, and whether it's an internship or a full-time role. And then the way I think about questions too, I always use like silly comparisons when it comes to interviewing. I always say like interviews are like modern dating, right? So to take some of the nervousness you might have around the interview, you want to think of it like you're also interviewing, right? You hear this a lot, but it's true. It's you're also interviewing the company. that you are going out for, and you want to see if they are also a mutually beneficial fit for you, not just in the short term, right? I mean, hopefully we're thinking long term. So that's what I think of, when you're going into the interview process.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that, to Caroline and Emily, is that uh, people love to talk about themselves. Doesn't matter who they are. So doing a little bit of LinkedIn research on your interviewer. Say, I see you've been in this role at McKinsey for 6 years. Tell me what's your favorite part about there. What would I have to look forward to? So similarly, with the same construct of let them imagine you there, but really lean in on their experience. It shows you're interested. And again, people love to talk about themselves. Right, wrong, or indifferent. And in terms of where to go, right? If you're having trouble where to go, look for, how do I even begin to develop these questions? Your Career Center is a wonderful resource for you to go get some assistance there as well.
Thank you, Kim. And this is actually a really good segue into our next question about talking to current employees. So, should students be reaching out to current employees as part of their interview preparation? Do you all feel like it could help them, either in asking possible questions or just getting to know the culture of the company?
Yeah. I'll go. So, because I just spoke, but so yes, but I think you need to be thoughtful about who you're going after, right? Who you're reaching out to. I can't speak for Caroline or Emily, but I'm sure it's the same thing, especially during this, in September, October, November, January, February, March. You don't have time to, even take 10 minutes to be able to do that. So I recommend do a little LinkedIn research and find people who are at the company that also went to your school that you're at, and make the connection with them via LinkedIn, and say, hey, I'm a student at USC. I'm very interested in this internship program. As a fellow Trojan, can I grab 15 minutes of your time to hear about your experience at the company? So it's important to do that. I think it's important to engage with employees of the company, but I think you need to be thoughtful about who you're engaging with based on people's, time of year, workloads, etc.
Yeah, just following up on that, and to plug that Connect with McKinsey program again, that we host during the spring. It provides opportunities to connect with fellow Trojans at McKinsey through that program during office hours and other events that we're hosting targeted at our USC students that are wanting to apply for our upcoming roles. For our firm, when you're coming from USC, me and some of the other recruiters that work with USC have an extensive network and have events that we put on. So my recommendation would just be to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to provide you with some of these resources and do Connect with McKinsey. That's really like the catch-all for that. We do get a lot of outreach. Unfortunately for me, for example, I'm not able to really follow LinkedIn. So it's really, again, like researching the company and what they have. It's also not a part of our assessment process. How many people you know at the firm, how many you've connected with, if you have a referral or not, that's not part of our assessment process. So if you're connecting with someone, it should really be because you're wanting to learn more about the firm or ask questions. And I know all firms are different in that sense, right? Some firms do appreciate that a lot of people at the firm, or like I've connected with a lot during recruiting, and some, like McKinsey, we don't assess that. So again, I think it really depends on the firm, but I'll remember to put it in the chat later, the Connect with McKinsey. So if you're interested, you could definitely connect with some of our alumni through that and ask questions.
Yeah, I agree with both Kim and Caroline. I think those are very great tips. I think, like I know we talked about LinkedIn in another session. I know outreach with that can be a little challenging sometimes depending on the time of the year, but I would say, as far as reaching out to employees, I think if you can do it before the school, if you can even try to reach out during the summertime when you have more time, I think that's a good time to put in the preparation before the traditional fall recruitment season comes in. So I know some of you might have some internships underneath your belt, but maybe have like a something like a tangible goal. Maybe it's like I might connect with like 2 to 3 people this month in industries that I'm really interested in or companies, right? And then I feel like summer you might have some more time to do that versus like when you're in school. I know it can get a little bit challenging, but you can have the same mentality throughout the year, right? I'm going to meet one new person at X company, once per month. Cause I know sometimes if you set these crazy goals, it's not doable. And yeah, you can play between LinkedIn or use they say the Trojan network, right? Definitely take advantage of using that.
Yeah, I love all of the advice given, and adding to what you said, Emily, I also want to recommend to our students listening to familiarize yourself with the recruiting timelines, because the timeline for Caroline is going to look very different from the timeline from Emily and Kim, right? So if you're trying to network with people from McKinsey, in October, it may be a little late, right? So just make sure you are familiarizing yourself with the timelines when you are trying to network to prepare. So just adding that tidbit, but all wonderful advice from our panelists. And for our students, if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A. There will be time at the end for questions from the audience. Now, transitioning more to during the interview. So we have like a dress code we recommend to students. But what do you all recommend students wear to an interview? Is there such a thing as being overdressed or underdressed? And, culture is kind of different, varies by company. So with that in mind, how do you all recommend for students to dress for interviews, both virtual and in person?
I can go first. I think straight off the bat, like business casual is what comes to mind for me at least. If you want to wear a suit or something like that as well, that's totally fine. But I think business casual, at least for us, is kind of the generalized advice. And then obviously you also need to be comfortable, right? So I think having that in the back of your mind as well, if something makes you feel really uncomfortable and like you'd rather wear slacks with this nice sweater and a shirt instead of a full suit, that's totally fine as well. Or if you want to wear more casual shoes with your suit or something like that. I think when it comes to dress code, obviously it's something that changes over time and it's totally different now from what it was 20 years ago. But I think business casual, make sure that you're comfortable, and don't be afraid to show a little personality if you want to. That's always a good thing. Yeah.
I wouldn't add anything differently. I agree. I mean, most importantly, the comfort piece of it, right? That you've got to be comfortable. And you're not going to be comfortable in your own skin if you're not comfortable in your clothes. And we want to see the real you. So, yeah, we're business casual. I mean, and we're a remote first company, so we joke, but we call it the business mullet, even when you're on video, right? You've got your business on the top and party on the bottom. Just sometimes the party on the bottom isn't appropriate for people to see if you're on video, right? So just keep that in mind. If you're on a video call and you have to get up and go do something while you're on camera and you've got like inappropriate shorts or something on the bottom, just be aware of that when you're on video. But yeah, business casual 100%.
Yeah, I agree with both Kim and Caroline. It depends on the company, right? And maybe the industry that you're going out for. So always just play it smart. Always ask for advice, maybe from like current employees if they went through the interview process. So, sometimes when you think of like finance or consulting, banking, they might have a certain dress code. So just make sure you are aware. Every company's going to look a little bit, or like the firms might have a different policy or expectation, I should say, not policy. And as far as a virtual interview tip, I would say this is just something I've noticed because I do interview a lot of students. I know sometimes, you might not have a space to interview in. Sometimes it's in your dorm, but I would try to like schedule that ahead of time where you could be in an environment that's quiet. I'm very understanding. Like sometimes you might have your dorm room bed in the background, but sometimes some interviews are not as chill. So I would just try to be mindful of those little things. And if it's in person, you might be a little bit more business professional. If you're, online, I would say, I am mindful of those little things. I would say I am impressed when people do dress up. I love it. I think you can never be overdressed, to be quite honest, but I'm also not going to dock you if you're not wearing a full on suit either. So just be mindful of who you're interviewing with and the company.
And I have to, like Emily, I totally agree with the virtual stuff. Make sure you have a good internet connection if you're doing a virtual interview, that you're in a quiet place, that your focus is on the screen and not like on things around you. That is definitely something that I've experienced as well. So yeah.
I love all the advice, especially about being comfortable. For some students, it's, your first time dressing that formally. Make sure that you are comfortable, and also in the sense that it is something that feels authentic to you. So if like you're not someone who likes wearing skirts, that's okay. You can wear dress pants or an alternative that feels comfortable and authentic and professional to you. So I really love that you all mentioned that as well. Okay, so a common question that we get from students is the "tell me about yourself" question that is asked in almost every interview, right? And I think students often feel anxiety about their answer. So I want to ask you all today, what do you all hope to learn from the "tell me about yourself" question? Hard one, right?
Yeah, I think since we do more of the personal experience interview, I think it kind of goes along the axis of the questions. So we want to learn like more about how you work with others, how you approach difficult situations, how you think about challenges, right? How are you kind of like, tell me about a time where you had to go through a challenging situation where someone had an opposite opinion. So it really comes back to those PEIs for us. So I think we kind of, like for kind of signs of like your leadership experience, stuff like that, right? So, but I think again here, like bringing your authentic self as a general advice, like whatever you think is important about you when you do your introduction. That might also be a good exercise to like ask maybe some family and friends about, like, when you think about me, what do you think of? How do you think I should introduce myself when I do like a quick intro, just to get some outside perspective as well? Because I definitely know like my mom would introduce me very differently than what I introduce myself, right? So getting that input and seeing how and bringing that into as you're preparing. So
Yeah, I can answer next. It's so funny. I actually just did this exercise with my own "tell me about yourself." So it was actually more challenging than you might think, to especially if you've been in like the workforce for a bit. I think sometimes it's really hard to narrow it down to like under 2 minutes. I think the happy medium is like 60 to 90 seconds. So I kind of break it up, or I recommend candidates breaking it up into 3 parts. And so you might start with like part one, like describe who you are and what you currently do, right? You might say like, I'm a full-time student. I also intern here, or I'm a president of SWE, or whatever it might be, right? I'm someone who also, I'm very I do like to include something about myself that, is something I'm proud of. Like, I'm a first generation Mexican American college student, or whatever it might be, right? That's something that feels very authentic to you. Don't be afraid to mention that. And then part two would be like a quick highlight reel of whether it's your professional or academic accomplishments. Obviously, be very mindful of time. The things that you're really proud of. If you maybe have 1 or 2 internships underneath your belt, like, hey, I was a software engineer intern at AT&T, and then XYZ, right? You kind of talk about why you did this role and the impact that you had, and then you kind of transition into the next role. It's really going to just depend on where you're at in your academic journey, right? Whether maybe you're a junior or a senior looking for an internship or a full-time job. And then you'll kind of just close it out at the end with, explain why you're here today for this interview and why you really want to work for this company. So I think if you just break it up into 3 different parts, really practice on the 90 seconds if you can. Sometimes you might go a little bit over. Honestly, this is so uncomfortable, but I've recorded myself on like my laptop, and I highly recommend that students do that. It's very cringe, but the more you do it, the more natural it feels when you're in an interview. So that's how I recommend doing the tell me about yourself question.
I like breaking it up because it helps you, put focus where you need to put focus. That's a great recommendation. Um, in we want to see your personality, right? When you're doing your 90 seconds or 2 minutes, we want to be able to see you and hear you talk, but then can I see this person in my organization, how they interact? Are they engaging? Are they bringing you into the conversation, or is it kind of like wah wah? So doing all of those practices in the front end of it will help you get to where you're more comfortable and you can really feel like you're letting your personality shine. But we want to be able to see that. We want to be able to gauge, your experience with your communication skills and with your personality, because they all kind of weave together for that right fit with the company.
Love this. I feel like our students are going to have much stronger tell me about yourself answers now. And now shifting a little bit more to after the interview, students have heard different advice on thank you notes. Some people say you should send them, some people tell them you shouldn't. So I think we want to hear from recruiters directly. Should students still send a thank you note after the interview? And if they do, what's in it?
I'm old school and I think it's yes. I think it's a very generational response, quite frankly, right? So it's for me, it's 100% yes. It does a couple of things. It kind of puts the bow on the process for you. It allows you to kind of complete the cycle, at least this part of the process. But it also you have an opportunity in that note to reinforce your interest and then put another nugget where you see yourself in that company within that text of that thank you note. An example would be, thank you for your time. Emily, thank you for your time. I loved hearing about the sales program at AT&T. With my experience at Target, I know that I can step right in and make an immediate impact. So just connecting her experience, her needs with your experiences, will kind of give you that last kind of like, here I am, right? Don't forget about me, and those things resonate. So that's
Yeah.
what I would say.
Yeah, I think for like our process specifically, it's not something that's taken into evaluation. So it's really up to you if you want to do it or not. Everyone gets a phone call after an interview day. So you can talk to one of your assessors about how it went and potentially follow up there. If you want to, you can shoot them like an email or a LinkedIn message, but it's not something that you have to do. And that's something that's going to impact your candidacy.
I love that you have that, Caroline, that opportunity for candidates to talk with someone. I wish we had that. That is really awesome. I concur with everything that was just said. I think that if you are going to do a thank you note, try to include like a specific reference that y'all had a conversation about. I feel like because we do, traditionally get a lot of like general thank you emails, but if you're able to highlight something that really stood out to you during the conversation, like, if I have time, sometimes I will make the interview more conversational. We might talk about some random common interest, whether it's like a podcast or just something, and just to show that you're a human and you're someone who, how everyone has been saying, like, you can be authentic, in the interview and in the workplace. And I think that just it really, I love a good thank you email if you're able to do it right, of course. So keep it short, keep it concise, but keep it very relevant as well.
Yes, and I think just to add on to what everyone said, you don't really know which recruiter or hiring manager you're getting, right? You might have someone who it's make or break if you send one, and you might have someone who doesn't really care, but the moral of the story is it doesn't hurt to send one, right? It can only help you. So, with all that said, we're gonna transition now to questions from the audience. So we have a few for you all. We'll start with the one about reaching out to recruiters. So one of our students asked, how should they reach out to recruiters after applying to your, internships or jobs? They want to show interest, but they understand you're all busy. What would be the appropriate thing to do? Should they ask to meet or referral or interview, or what advice do you have for, this student?
I can go first, at least from the McKinsey perspective. You don't have to reach out to me after you apply if you don't have a specific question. As I said, it's not something that's going to affect your candidacy at all. So it's more about if you have specific questions. My information is available through List at least. But I think also reaching out to recruiters before you apply just to get more information about the role or any questions that you might have is usually what I see most candidates do. And they take advantage of, like, I know at least for management consulting, a lot of recruiters will have like office hours and stuff that you can join, those type of things, so that before you're entering an application, you're actually checking to make sure that you are approaching the resume right, that you understand the process and have all that information before applying, because then you don't have to go through the whole process of like withdrawing and then resubmitting, or if something went wrong, right? So I think so, at least for management consulting and McKinsey, we're usually like available throughout. But you made a great point earlier, Liz, about also understanding timelines for the different firms, right? So as I said, during spring, this is really when we're available and kind of connecting with students. So you can even go McKinsey USC and you'll find information for recruiters on there that you can reach out to. So yeah.
For the sake
I
of
can
time, I'm
be
gonna-
quick. Oh, do you want to take that really quick? I was struggling with that one a little bit. It can get a little complex, but I think Caroline said it best. To be mindful of the timelines at the end of the day. So like for AT&T, I will say I feel like from like end of August through like April, we're kind of in the midst of we're a pretty lean team right now. So it's hard for me to get to a lot of like candidate emails right away. It might take me a week or two because a lot of us are kind of doing full cycle like interviews, offers, background checks. But I would say, like I said, the best time to really get a hold of like a lot of AT&T individuals is the off season, which is like May through like August. And sometimes what I recommend, if you can't speak with the recruiter, maybe ask if they can connect you with, for example, I help with all of our early career programs. So sometimes it can't be me who can chat with you, but I think it's if you're open to speaking with a current employee, which you usually are, don't be afraid to ask for that introduction. It's usually I have a pretty nice network now working with all the programs, so I'm always happy to refer you to an amazing employee that we have here, and they're always willing to chat. So sometimes ask for that introduction. Don't be afraid to, I would say don't be afraid to ask.
For the sake of time, I am gonna move to the next question. So for students who have zero prior internship experience, how can they gain a competitive edge against candidates who do have some experience when interviewing?
Well, I'll go with this one. So, personal story. I have a daughter who was this exact situation, getting ready to graduate from college, and she ended up taking an unpaid internship to get that experience. But I resonate with this type of question all the time because I think back to when it happened. I was like, "What are we doing?" But this is where you're going to need to really weigh in on those transferable skills that you have. You're going to have to kind of lean in to assuming that are involved on campus in a student organization or part of a club or a group. You're going to need to kind of pull out those leadership dimensions and business type skills or even technical skills, if you've got web design responsibility for your student organization, and pull that to the forefront and really focus on what you bring to the table and how you've applied those skills based on what that job has highlighted as what's most important to the hiring manager or to that firm. So there's ways to do it, but you're gonna have to really focus on those extracurriculars to bring yourself into the conversation.
Yeah, and just building off of that, at least for us, we always look for potential. We don't look for specific kind of experiences when looking at resumes. So I think experience is experience, right? So if you haven't had an internship, if you had a part-time job, or if you've had, as Kim mentioned, been involved with different student clubs, volunteering, leaning in more on those and focusing on the impact, the leadership, the exposure that you've had there, and being able to quantify that, right? So I think that is another important thing, is being able to quantify your impact. One thing is what you did, but what is what you actually achieved, what you did. And I think, Kim, you also made this point earlier in the session. So I wouldn't worry too much about because not everyone, like I, for one, was not able to take an unpaid internship or anything like that. I had to work. I was working retail all through college because I had to. I think there's definitely ways of using that as a strength instead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm gonna add one more thing to that. Sorry, Emily. There's also the scenario where you've gone to school full time for 2.5 or 3 years, right? So you did that to save yourself a year of tuition. That's a big important factor to draw into that conversation as well, as a different type of example, if there's not the club experience. So yeah, sorry, Emily.
Oh, no, those are good. I have nothing to add.
Really good advice. Something else that students kind of forget is your classes, you do academic projects too, and often sometimes you lead the projects. That shows your leadership experience. There's so many different ways that you can show you're qualified for the internship without having internship experience, as well said by Caroline and Kim. But for the sake of time, we'll move on to the next question. So earlier we talked a lot about like preparation for an interview. So I think this is what prompted this question. But how do you find the right balance between being prepared and excessively rehearsed? Because obviously you don't want candidates to sound, robotic either. So how can a student make sure that they remain authentic to themselves while also, adhering to the guidelines of an interview?
Yeah, I can take this one. I recently did an exercise doing this, and it had been a long time for me. So I feel like I'm someone who over prepares with things, and that can sometimes not be a good thing. So because you want to come off natural and not rehearse. So I would say it's okay if you feel more comfortable writing, like Googling some standard behavioral questions and gathering some bullet points. It's going to take some time if, sometimes you can't remember a certain project you worked on, or maybe a certain experience in an internship, right? So you're going to definitely need some time to prepare and kind of putting some notes together. And then I gave the suggestion of, sometimes you don't have someone to do a mock interview with. I recommend at least doing one if you can. If you can do more, amazing. But if you can do at least one with a friend, with a professor, with a peer, with someone in career services, take advantage of all the resources. Don't be afraid to ask for help. And then lastly, it's okay to record yourself. It's the cringiest thing ever, but I promise you it will pay off dividends at the end. And just kind of watching yourself back, look, like, are you someone who uses your hands a lot? Like, I know sometimes that can be me. Are you someone who doesn't always look someone in the eye when you're speaking to them? Lastly, with virtual interviews, that can be a little bit tricky. I'll be very honest. I can tell if someone's reading off notes. That happens, but I highly suggest that you do not do that, because it doesn't come off very natural, and it's a little awkward for the interviewer, because more oftentimes than not, they can tell that you're reading notes. Unless you're like super good at multitasking like that, I mean, by all means, whatever works for you. But just remember at the end of the day, it's a conversation. It's really just you. Someone gave me this advice. It's really just you telling these really cool stories about yourself. And don't feel like it needs to be super duper professional all the time. So that's my advice.
Yeah, I would just add on to listen to what your interviewer is saying, right? I think that can also help you with not feeling too rehearsed. Like when we have candidates that come in that kind of just like jump in, because just sit back and listen to what your interviewer is asking you, saying to you, and also feel free to like take a moment to like, can I just, because obviously with cases and stuff, you sometimes need a minute to just like digest information before you jump in. So I think that is something to keep in your back of your mind as you're going in, to not feel come across as overly rehearsed, is taking that moment and taking a breath and listening.
Thank you all so much. I also just want to plug our resources. I know that Emily had mentioned recording yourself. Yes, it is a little bit cringe to watch yourself back, but it is really good practice. You can catch yourself with the likes if you sound too robotic, right? So we have a resource called Big Interview within Handshake. That actually records you, and it's like an AI person telling or asking you questions, and it gives you feedback too. So highly recommend that you use it. We also do mock interviews. Someone already mentioned it in the Q&A, but I also want to plug our mock interviews with the Career Center staff, where we can also give you feedback on where to improve in your interview and, you know, refining your answers and making sure you're not too robotic, but you are prepared. So I thank you all for mentioning that, the practice part, the mock interview part. And if you don't want to come see us or record yourself, ask a friend, right? Ask someone who will be honest with you and will give you good feedback. Because ultimately everyone's rooting for you to get that internship or that job, right? Okay, so we are moving on to our last few questions. One of our students asked, how do you answer the question, where do you see yourself in 10 years? I know sometimes it's, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? But you know, those questions that are getting at your future, right?
If you don't know, I think it's okay to say, I don't know. I can tell you where I would like to be, but or in 5 years, I'm hopeful to be here. But if you don't know, if you're not at the point where you're like 10 years, it's okay to say, well, that's a great question. I haven't thought about 10. I have thought about 5, and here's where I think I'd like to be in 5 years. So, but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to say, I'm focusing day at a time or anything like that. It's okay. It's to just be honest and be yourself.
Caroline or Emily, did you want to add anything? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And then I think that about wraps up the Q&A part of it, but I also wanted to ask one more question to our panelists. Do you have any final advice that you would think would be very helpful for our students to take away from today's panel to help them ace their interviews?
I can go first, I think. This point has been made a couple of times by, I think, everyone, is familiarizing yourself with the organization, their timelines, how they do recruiting, just so you're making sure that you're connecting with people at the right time, that you're taking advantage of resources, and that you're actually getting your application at a time where jobs are open and there are recruiting, right? I think that is very important to prepare. And then again, taking advantage of those resources that are provided to you, especially for us, at least, like we take pride in our webpage, in our student careers page online, where you can find basically everything from recruiter contacts to videos explaining stuff. And you'd be surprised how many times I have candidates reaching out and I'm like, did you check this out? And they haven't. So I think that is always good to look at.
I mean, I'll add the obvious is be yourself, right? And remember, as you're going through your prep, this is not just about, oh, will the company like me? It is, and we talked about this earlier. This is as much of as an important factor as, do I like the company? Do I like what I see? Do I like what I hear? Um, make it a beneficial experience, so you walk away from that knowing that, yes, this is a place I want to be, or you know what, I don't think this is it for me. But the only way you'll know that is that if you be yourself, you ask questions that are important to you, and you tell your stories the way that you want to tell your stories.
Yeah, I think we all gave some great nuggets, so hopefully you can try to implement that in your preparation. I'm trying to think if there's anything, I mean, we already kind of said be authentic. Um, and I think it's not just like the way you convey yourself in an interview, but it's also in you. It starts with your job search, which Kim was saying, right? You want to ensure that the companies that you are going out for really align with, if that is the type of person you are, do they align with maybe your ethics and your values, your work-life balance, like what really matters to you? And don't be afraid to ask those questions in the interview. I think it's important to truly take it, like I said, it kind of feels like an awkward date and you're asking sometimes some uncomfortable questions, and it's vice versa, right? We're really trying to get to know each other and see if we're going to be a good fit and, you know, make it a long-term relationship, right? So I would say it's all about just drilling. I use the word drills a lot. I think I grew up as an athlete, so drilling, just drill, and you'll just come off very natural once you get to the interview process. And it's a lot more natural as you get more interviews underneath your belt. You're going to feel very comfortable. So sometimes it's just getting that one, and then once you keep going, you'll feel like you can truly show up as your authentic self. So I wish you all the best of luck. And even if you don't do well in an interview, I saw this on a TikTok. It's okay. It's not the end of the world. Believe it or not, your life will continue being amazing. It's just a learning lesson at the end of the day. It happens. It's okay.
Yeah, I love how you finished with that, Emily. You're not going to get every internship or job you interview for. That's okay. It's still good practice, right? I also wanted to give my panelists an opportunity to talk about any opportunities that you wanted to mention to our students at your organizations, or if you wanted to add anything to the chat, whether it be your LinkedIn, links to your opportunities. So as our students listening today can have a chance to connect with you or to learn more about, you know, what you're hiring for.
Sure, I'm happy to start off. I think Lauren just shared the Connect with McKinsey program to everyone. Thank you for that. So we are kicking off our recruiting for 2026 start dates. So our business analyst full-time role and our summer business analyst. So anyone who's graduating December 25 to June 26 would be eligible for the full-time role, and then from June 26 to June 27 would be for the summer business analyst role. So please can register for Connect with McKinsey, and I'll be in touch with everything from office hours with me, office hours with some of my fantastic colleagues from USC. We'll also be hosting different sessions with our affinity networks on the North America level, sessions on the North America level about getting to know McKinsey, resume preps, all of that good stuff. So application will open on July 1st for those roles, with deadlines on July 10th and July 17th. All that can be found on Connect with McKinsey. So please register there, and we'll be in touch with more information.
Amazing. And then Emily, I copy and pasted your links to the public chat so you can see the internships that they're hiring for, as well as full-time for AT&T. And then Kim, do you want me to copy and paste your LinkedIn?
Put it in there. And we will be back on campus in the fall for our summer 2026 opportunities.
Perfect. Okay. Copy and pasted the DirecTV opportunities, and then one more for AT&T. Perfect. Okay, yeah, so students, we've put all the links in the chats to learn about their opportunities, to connect with them. Thank you so much, Caroline, Emily, and Kim. You have been amazing panelists. I feel like I learned something myself, like from this panel. So thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for your advice. All the students who attended today, you're going to see them in your interviews and they're going to be doing great. So thank you so much.
Very good.
Have a great rest of your afternoon, everybody. And the weekend's coming up, so have a great weekend.
You
Yeah,
too.
everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.